hi everyone. So I am talking about Brexit today, and you'd know I'm a lawyer because I've arrived in a suit and I have a 34-page PowerPoint with me. So I think the next talk is about a number of themes, and one of them is uncertainty. So I guess with Brexit, that's the uncertain part. So as you can see, we have a pretty detailed agenda. I'm going to skip most of it. I think I've got 10 or 15 minutes, so I'm just going to focus on Brexit more generally. I've then got a lot of slides which go into real detail about trade and customs, the impact on tax, competition, IT, commercial. We won't go through them. If anyone's interested, they can get the slide deck afterwards and they can go through it, or they can speak to me. And then I'll also just give kind of a view from an M&A perspective, because I am an M&A lawyer. So what happened, why did it happen, and what's the result? So I think everyone knows what happened. So last summer, there was a referendum. It didn't have a direct effect. It was advisory. So the people effectively were telling the government that they wanted to leave Europe. Why did the government give a referendum? Well, I think we all know from the media, David Cameron was trying to have a SOP to the right side of his party, and he was trying to undercut UKIP. What were the main kind of themes in the election? Again, we'll all remember from a year ago, the main things that resonated with me were immigration. So it felt like the electorate wanted control of the borders, together with sovereignty. The idea that the UK courts would be sovereign and that the ECJ, the European courts, would not take precedence over them. So the result is that I think Article 50 has been triggered. Exit negotiations will start. So the process itself has to be completed in 2 years. What happens after the end of 2 years? Well, if something isn't negotiated, we fall back on World Trade Organization terms. EU laws continue to apply in the UK in the interim period. Obviously, there's going to be some uncertainty. I think we talk in a couple of slides a little bit about the election that happened this month and the uncertainty that has brought to Brexit. Okay, so again, we've seen a lot of this in the media over the last year. So what are the different models that the UK could go for? So we've heard a lot of talk about the Norwegian model. So look, if you think about this as a spectrum, so what's most like what we have now? That's the Norwegian model. What's least like what we have now? That's WTO rules. People discuss in a different way. They say hard Brexit and soft Brexit. So the softest Brexit is the Norwegian model. What does that mean? That means that we'd still be part of the single market. And in the next slide, we'll go into that in a little bit more detail. But that would have the look and feel of what we currently have. The difference would be that we'd have no influence over the rules that are imposed in the UK. The next softest is the Swiss model. So the Swiss model, the Swiss people in a referendum in 1992 were asked whether they wanted a Norwegian model, and they said no. And then in the years that have followed 1992, there's been a series of kind of bilateral agreements negotiated with the EU. I think there's about 100. So it's taken years and years to get to where they are. And if we listen to what Theresa May says, it's probably unlikely we'll get a Swiss model. She wants a clean break. What the Swiss have would take years of negotiation. The next one, some people call it the Turkish model. So this is the customs union. A customs union is very different to a single market. The way to kind of think about it is in a customs union, you have a common and external tariff, and you have no tariffs amongst the members of the customs union. The single market is, I guess, the customs union, I guess, on steroids a little bit. So there's a lot more. There's a lot more integration. All the rules in a single market are common, etc. Then we have the next one, which is the FTA. And the way to think about this is that's the Canadian model. So I think everyone knows that Canada and the EU were negotiating a treaty recently. So again, it's kind of like a bilateral agreement for free trade or non-tariffs, so no customs or tariffs to be applied. And then the last one is the fallback WTO rules, so World Trade Organization rules. So if after 2 years we can't agree anything, then we fall back on WTO rules. That would mean tariffs would apply with respect to the import and the export of products and services. So this slide is essentially the last slide, just in a grid format. And just the key things to take from this are, if I think about what resonated in the election, what was important to the British people, and it's probably the second last row, free movement of people. So if you kind of have that in mind, which of these would, stop free movement of people? And I think 3 of the 5 do. What isn't there as well is the sovereignty of the UK courts. So which of these would allow for the sovereignty of the UK courts? And then I think one of the most important ones is just the last one at the bottom, which people aren't really talking about. I mean, if you went for the Norwegian model and, we were in the single market, we'd kind of have what we have now, but we wouldn't have a place at the table when things are being negotiated in Europe. So we'd be in a less good position. So again, people are talking about hard or soft Brexit. I think we've gone through this already a little bit. So the UK election. So we had a UK election very recently, as everyone knows, and we've got a hung parliament. So hung parliament means in the UK, you need 326 MPs to have a majority government. What happens when you don't? Well, a number of things can happen. What happened last time was that the Conservatives went into a coalition with the Lib Dems. That was a formal coalition. So the quid pro quo from the Conservatives to the Liberal Democrats was that they'd get government ministers. That's not what's happening at the moment. At the moment, negotiations are all going between Theresa May and the DUP. They're not negotiating a coalition. It is not a coalition. They're negotiating a confidence and supply arrangement. And all that means is that the Conservatives would be in power. They would be the government. When it came to votes on confidence in the government or when it came to votes on supply, and supply means budget. So just on those 2 things, the DUP would have agreed to have voted alongside the Conservatives. Why would they do that? Well, the quid pro quo would be that the Conservative government will have to bend the knee and give some concessions to the DUP. And what they are, we don't know yet, but it could be extra funding for Northern Ireland. Obviously, as an Irishman, I'd be quite concerned about the border between the north and south, so I'm sure that's been discussed at the moment. So what does the election mean for Brexit? Well, I mean, it's funny. I mean, like, we're all listening to the media and we're all hearing it, and kind of what I'm hearing is, Theresa May went out to the people. She said, "Look, I'm about to negotiate. I need a mandate from you, the people." The Conservatives are back. They've got the highest number of MPs, but less than before. What kind of message does that send? Does that mean that she still has a mandate? Who knows? I think the city is sensing, though, that there could be a softer Brexit. And I think that's fair. And even I think Philip Hammond, the Chancellor in the news today, I think was signalling that his priority will be the economic situation in the UK over things like the free movement of people, sovereignty and whatnot. Okay, so the next slides go into every subset of the law and how Brexit affects it. I don't want to do that because I'd like the panel to come up shortly. What I would say is just an M&A. I am an M&A lawyer. What's the view of Baker McKenzie on it? I think that in the run-up to the referendum, June of last year, it felt like M&A activity was pausing. It felt like a lot of investors were waiting to see how things went before they made investment decisions. If the referendum had gone the other way, we would have had a lot of M&A activity. The way things went, I mean, with the referendum going for Brexit, July and August are usually quiet months. So the question mark was whether we'd see a lot of processes starting in September. And there was a lot of speculation that, there'd be a lot less than there otherwise would be. I think in fairness that, facts for our firm hasn't borne that out. It's been a really busy year. It's been very busy on the M&A front, which is good. And I think then if you kind of think about, I guess we're here today, at a tech conference, can we talk about how Brexit can affect different asset classes in different ways? And that's probably a little bit more tricky. What we can say kind of on a macro basis is that investors are going to be they won't be as interested in investments into companies that are reliant on government funding in particular, because government funding is obviously the performance of the general economy affects indirectly government funding. If you think it through, after 2008, we saw government funding slash for a lot of companies. And then the other thing to say, and it's an obvious one as well, is that any companies that are kind of heavily regulated in a regulated sector, I think a lot of investors are looking at that and they're kind of trying to figure out what that looks like down the line. Obviously, there's probably going to be this giant repeal bill, but it's more after that, will UK and EU law slowly diverge over the next number of years? As I say, the next number of slides go into that in a little bit of detail, but what I'd suggest, I'm sure you can get those slides from the organizer and have a look at them or contact me outside this. So I think I'll pause there. The message, I think, is that M&A activity is buoyant at the moment, which might be a little bit counterintuitive, but that's where we are. Thank you.